Hey guys, it's Kat with Kat's Crazy Life. I live the crazy life so you don't have to. Today we're taking a special adventure to look at my very favorite painting on this entire planet with the artist of Perry Vasquez. Thank you, Perry. Why don't you take us on a journey to the gates of heck?
Sure. Okay. Well, I should probably tell you a little bit of how I became obsessed with this to begin with. And when I was 19 years old, I was introduced to the sculptures of Auguste Rodin. Principal among those was a 22-foot tall sculpture he made called The Gates of Hell, which was actually a proposal for a crafts museum that was never built in Paris.
Really?
But the original was built out of plaster of Paris, and he incorporated a lot of his famous sculptors into it, such as the Thinker, which sits at the very top of the Gates of Hell. So my first impression upon seeing the Gates of Hell, which were cast, five of them were cast in the 20th century, um, my first impression was walking up to it and looking straight up and getting a sense of vertigo from seeing all these figures jutting out from the architecture of this brass edifice, and not really knowing or understanding what they meant, just being overwhelmed by the sheer force of the sculpture itself and the presence of the piece. Fast forward about 30 or 40 years later, I was putting together some designs, collage pieces, and I thought it might be interesting to work with that subject matter, the gates of hell. And so I thought that as long as I'm going to do this, maybe it would be interesting to reinterpret the gates of hell into a more contemporary mythology.
Fun.
And because superhero artists seem to rely a lot on classical art to draw their figures, I thought, well, why not populate the gates of hell, reimagined as the gates of heck, featuring Marvel, DC, and other comic book heroes. So that was essentially the how the idea came to be.
Wonderful. Well, now that we've learned a little bit of the background, why
Mhm.
don't we take a walk down to the gates?
Okay,
The
let's go.
gates of
Meet you
heck.
down by the gates of heck. Let's go.
Wonderful. Okay, and here we go. Wow, there is such a story to be told here.
So the gates are divided. This kind of a gate was not just a random design that Rodin chose, but the elements of the gate are very specific, and the one of the most interesting parts of it for me was it's called the tympanum, and the tympanum is at the very top, and that's the row of heads that you see.
Mm-hmm.
And in the original Gates of Hell, Rodin also included a series of heads on a shelf, a tray.
Oh.
Those were anonymous studio studies of heads, but in my painting, I decided to populate them with contemporary political and cultural figures.
Absolutely. And there's a little bit of something for everybody, I see.
This was done in 2008, so some of the figures are dated back to that time, and some of them are more universal.
Absolutely. Now, I do know that you have music that you wrote to come along with us on this journey to the gates of heck.
That's right. So it took about 2 years to complete this painting. And so as I was working on it, I started receiving lyrics. I started thinking of lyrics, or lyrics were coming to me. And not only that, but then I could start to imagine some music going along with those words. So I began basically to write a series of songs based on an interpretation of not only the gates of hell, Rodin's sculpture, but I decided to do a deep dive into the text that inspired Rodin, which is Dante's Inferno, which was a
Excellent.
14th century Christian epic poem written in colloquial Italian. So after reading the Inferno, I had a lot of inspiration and I started writing songs. And a couple of the songs, I had one long poem which was about superheroes and battling it out at the gates of heck. And it was so long that I had to break the song into two parts. The other songs in the album were just sort of various kinds of apocalyptic themes and meditations on death, because that's what the gates of hell is about. It's about a lot of things. It's about divine justice. It's about the afterlife. It's about redemption, and it's about maintaining some kind of religious and legal hierarchy in the material world. So it was a fascinating text, and I was inspired by it on so many levels.
Nice. The symbolism really just gets me, because you really take ancient archetypes and make them so relatable to today.
Yeah, thank you. But that was what was so fun about working with superheroes, is because they are archetypes, and they take their identities from so many different things. Taking an identity from an animal, is an obvious one. To take Spider-Man for instance, but there are other superheroes whose identity is based on other kinds of elements or forces in the universe, and that's very mythic. You also have, say, someone like Iron Man, who's just basically a very smart man who can build and use technology to give him superpowers. There's nothing inherent in his being or his physiognomy or his origins that give him superpowers. It's just something that he gifts to himself. I guess you can say that he gifted himself his identity of Iron Man.
Similar to Batman, even.
Batman was called to justice.
So that's true. Yes, right? That's true. That's very different. Yes.
He was another superhero who was driven by a strong, I guess you could say, strong ethical impulses, and he relied on his inventiveness and cleverness.
Nice.
Very much like Iron Man, yeah.
Yeah, I love the background information, because, a lot of times you see paintings that have so many stories within the story, and it's nice to get a peek inside the artist's mind.
Well, my mind was thinking as I was painting this that it was really almost like writing a book or doing a film, because there's a world inside, there was a world inside of Rodin's Gates of Hell, and I was challenged to see if I could reproduce my own world, and that's why it took 2 years, because it takes 2 years to write a novel. It takes 2 years to make a film. It generally doesn't take 2 years to make a painting, but in this case it did.
Well, and you're using oil paintings as well, oils?
This was done with oil paint, yes.
Yeah, that's not easy.
Well, I'd been developing my oil painting skills since 2005, so I had about 5 or 6 years of practice to get my chops down.
Yeah, you clearly have them.
I think that I felt that I wanted to give myself a nice challenge, and I had been a very big fan of Salvador Dali and traditional oil painting skills, so I dared myself to do this, and that's how I came to do it.
Well, it's always about getting outside of our comfort zones.
Yeah, I was really far out of my comfort zone on this.
It's kind of scary when we start.
It was scary. I mean, there was a time where I felt that I just wasted 2 years of my life. And the process of getting this done was very, very specific. first of all, I just basically broke it down into sections and moved across. I think I started at the top and moved from left to right and moved down very purposefully.
Uh-huh.
And then I had the entire gates done, and then I had to figure out what I was going to do in the background. And that was when I almost lost my mind because I was really trying to take shortcuts and just do kinds of prismatic, abstract blendings of color.
Mm-hmm.
And I think at some point I realized that I had to challenge myself to do an apocalyptic landscape. And I just so happened that I watched a documentary film by Werner Herzog. Can't remember the name of it now, but it was one that was shot in the oil fields of Iraq during the Gulf War when all of the oil wells were burning. And it was literally an inferno. So based on that experience, I got the inspiration and I went back and I finished off the background.
This painting is just breathtaking for me. So I want you to understand that as an art lover, this art speaks to me because I'm a symbolism type of a person. So I truly appreciate the level of badassery.
Well, that's very nice. Thank you. All I can say is that I'm just trying. That's exactly how I felt the first time I saw Rodin's Gates of Hell. It took my breath away, and the same with Dante's Inferno. So I hope that I can pass that on to people who see the painting.
Well, I want to share the world with The Gates of Heck by Perry Vasquez. And Perry, I really appreciate you for hanging out with Kat on Kat's Crazy Life. Thank you.
You're welcome.